All right. We are live. Another episode of Four Factors here, presented by Vincerics. First week of the season now, officially in the books on the college basketball landscape. An exciting first week. We covered some of it on Friday, but it was Friday that was kind of the marquee start of the season in the college basketball world, with Duke, Arizona highlighting the slate that day. We'll talk about that probably briefly, especially in the context of Duke gets it going again today in a big game against Michigan State, a couple teams that struggled out of the gates. But before getting anything, Hunter, how's it going? You're down there in Lake Charles with McNeese. They've been taking care of business against some less than stellar opponents, but getting grooved up for the rest of the season after that big win against VCU to start the year. I know you've been a little bit of a fly on the wall down there of the start of the Will Wade era. How are things going?
Yeah, it's going well down here. They, of course, opened the season with that big win at VCU going into the Siegel Center. VCU won't drop more than a few games there all year, so that was a huge win for the program. To your point, they play three weaker teams, NAIA teams down here. They beat up on College of Biblical Studies, beat up on Champion Christian, and they have Latorno tonight. But the team's really working hard, and they're really trying to get tuned up because this Saturday they head over to West Carolina. In a game that should shape up to be one of the best mid-major games of the weekend. West Carolina knocked off Notre Dame. McNeese State knocking off VCU. So the team's really just focused on taking care of business, playing well, playing the right way this week, and then going over to West Carolina and trying to get a statement win.
Yeah, and we could talk about that game a little bit more on probably Friday going to the weekend, because I agree with you. That's an interesting matchup at the mid-major level. And one of the nice things to see for McNeese, at least, I haven't watched the games, but just looking at the stat lines, looks like they're shooting the ball well from three-point range. And obviously probably not, the level of contest that you might get against a tougher opponent, but still making those shots against these levels of opponents. I'm sure that's building the confidence going into some bigger games going forward.
Yeah, I think it's been good for the guys to see their shots go down. A bunch of different scores that they're trying to piece together still and figure out how the rotations work, but no shortage of guys that can fill it up and knock down some three-pointers. Even the big men can step outside, hit some threes. So they're a fun team to watch, spread the ball around, move it quickly. It's a good offense they're running right now.
Awesome. And as we've said many times on the show, we will be keeping close tabs on the McNeese season. The launch of the Will Wade era down there in Lake Charles off to a great start, and hopefully more good things to come going forward. Last night, I also had some boots on the ground at Madison Square Garden for Michigan at St. John's. My first time actually seeing the Johnnies play there at MSG up into a myriad of college basketball games at Madison Square Garden, but never seen St. John's at home. And Hunter, I know you're a bit newer to the city, but I personally had never seen an actual St. John's fan in the flesh, but they were all out there last night. Unfortunately for St. John's, a rough start to the season. I don't know if you caught any of the action, probably just saw the score. I've got some thoughts on St. John's and Michigan, but I think a lot of the takeaway that I was seeing, at least on Twitter, was that Michigan looked really good. And I think there's some truth to that. I tend to lean towards a little bit that St. John's might be really bad this year. Any thoughts just looking at the scoreline, kind of seeing the result there? Obviously, St. John's favored in that game by 3 points to get blown out and really never in the contest. Kind of a surprising result. Any thoughts about what took place last night at the start of the Pitino era?
Yeah, I mean, it was an extremely exciting game. The energy was there to start the game, even just watching on TV. You could tell it was loud in that arena, and St. John's had a lot of fans getting crazy for the Pitino era getting kicked off. But yeah, statement win by Michigan. They're picked 11th in the Big 12 or Big 10 preseason poll. Some of their players, Doug McDaniel, talked about being slept on, and what better way to come out and make a statement, as you said, is 3-point underdogs to go win that game. What was it? 74-58 or something, just absolutely beat up on St. John's, the more physical team, the more together team. It was a dismantling by the Wolverines.
Yeah, and I think the concern, and like I said, I saw a lot of the takeaway being that Michigan looks really good. And I agree that they do look really good. And I think that selection in the Big Ten, they're going to greatly outperform that. I think they were even 30-1 last night to win the Big Ten. So there were people out there saying, they think they're a contender for the Big Ten championship. I actually think, being there and kind of seeing the speed of the game just up close, the problem for St. John's is, and I think the problem for Rick Pitino, and why I think it's going to be a big challenge for him to get anything out of this roster this year for St. John's, is Pitino preaches a high intensity, strong man-to-man defense, maybe get into the trap, maybe fall back into his zone. But the defensive end of the floor is where Pitino's made a lot of his career, just high energy on that end. And he was coaching the first half of that basketball game like the national championship. I mean, he was in the game. It was awesome to see. But unfortunately, there's just not guys on the St. John's roster with the foot speed or the athleticism to play that tight man-to-man defense that Rick Pitino kind of preaches, and that just in-your-face defensive effort. Michigan was just getting to the rim, getting by the first defender, killing that press. And it was just so easy for Michigan. And sure, there's credit to be given to Doug McDaniel for how he played and other players on the Michigan squad. But I'm just seeing a St. John's team that unfortunately just doesn't have the athletes or even the skill set to play the way that Pitino wants to play. And I walked out of that gym wondering if St. John's will win 4 or 5 games in the Big East. That was more my takeaway, honestly, than maybe what the upside is for Michigan, just because of the players on the roster and how it kind of contradicts maybe with the successful way that Pitino has coached in the past.
Yeah, I mean, even in the transfer portal era, it's going to take some time for some programs to turn around. The Johnnies have been down for a little bit. I think that just seeing the excitement around the Johnnies program was pretty cool to see. I think having their home games be at MSG with Pitino, it's definitely going to be a storyline to follow. It might not be happening in year one, but I trust Pitino to get that figured out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And yeah, I think this year, maybe the media hype, and the excitement around the team probably, at least to some people, maybe built up a little bit more than what we should probably expect for St. John's this very first year. You can be in the portal all you want, but it's going to be tough year one, especially in a conference with the depth of the Big East. Now, Villanova did lose last night. We could touch on that briefly. So maybe the depth at the bottom of the conference really, it's been poor historically, but maybe even a little bit more down this year. But the future should be bright there. And like I said, it was really cool to see Pitino just coaching it like it's the national championship. There's no question that he's treating this with the same level of tenacity that he's treated every job that he's had in his career. But at the end of the day, when you're running a lineup out onto the court that has multiple transfers from Iona, and obviously he wants to bring guys that he had success with at Iona, but we're still just talking about from a quality of player standpoint, just not the type of players that are going to have a ton of success at the top of the Big East. So a story we'll be watching all year. Hopefully get out to some more games. It was really fun to be there. Like I said, I've been to mainly college basketball games at MSG that are, random teams playing against each other. Yeah, there's fan bases of every team in the country here in New York City, but to see the St. John's faithful getting out there, they're excited. They know that this process is going to take a little bit of time. But yeah, I think my main takeaway was that I saw a lot of hype for Michigan. I'm going to temper my expectations there. I think they're playing in the battle for Atlantis next week. That'll be the first time to really judge Michigan. I just think that St. John's may be a little bit overhyped, and any positive takeaway from Michigan should be tempered in the context that I just don't think the St. John's team is that great.
Yeah, interesting night for the Big East. Villanova goes down at UPenn in the Palestra. Johnnies get it handed to them. It's going to be a big day today for the Big East. They got Marquette taking on Illinois. You got Providence taking on Wisconsin. Conference got a little beat up last night, so definitely looking for a bounce back. People are talking about the Big East being the best conference in the country, 4 ranked teams right now, but we'll have to see it play out.
Absolutely. I think that transitions nicely into getting into the action tonight. Obviously, we're going to try to be doing pods on as many days when there's big games as possible, and this definitely checks that box. We got started last Friday, and I think largely things went pretty well from us from a prediction standpoint, not necessarily the main goal of what we're doing here, but it was nice to get off on the right foot, at least of kind of a lean or a sense of maybe how the market is judging teams here early in the season. And we'll get to those Gavitt games, those Big East versus Big Ten matchups in a little bit, but do want to start with what's always one of the marquee sets of games to open the year, the Champions Classic, always featuring Michigan State, Kentucky, Kansas, and Duke. We'll start with the first game in that slate, which is Duke versus Michigan State, 2 teams that suffered losses in the opening week of the season. Michigan State's maybe more catastrophic than Duke's, losing to James Madison at home. They did bounce back and win against a less than stellar opponent next time out, but they have struggled from the 3-point line mightily in the opening 2 games of the season. And then you look at a Duke team who hosted Arizona as 5-point favorites, a game where we talked about there being really kind of a coin flip game against Arizona, and that's why we liked the +5 there on the Wildcats. But a Duke team, Filipowski, obviously a phenomenal player, one of the best performances I've seen of anybody so far this season, just how he played in that game. But ultimately, just not enough on the rest of the roster for Duke against a very balanced Arizona team. Maybe before getting into this game specifically, any takeaways from that Duke Arizona result early in the season?
Yeah, we talked about it. Duke, highly rated, second best team in the country according to the AP poll. But we talked a little bit about how that ranking was given to them and it wasn't earned. They have Filipowski coming back, Roach coming back, but they're relying on a myriad of freshmen and younger guys to step up. I know they got Mark Mitchell and Tyrese Proctor back as well, but I think a lot of that number 2 rating was baked in with their recruiting class. And don't take anything away from Arizona. Arizona played a great game, but maybe 2 is a little high for a team like Duke that could definitely finish the year there, but it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get it figured out with all the new pieces coming in. And that's why in this game tonight with Duke, Michigan State, I probably lean Michigan State just because I trust those senior guards. I trust Walker, Hogard, Jaden Akins. I trust those old guys to get it figured out because, they want to come out and make a statement. And if they can get this win tonight, it erases that bad loss they had in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, and I think the concerning thing for me from a Duke perspective is that, yeah, Filipowski, like I said, he might be one of the best, if not the best players in the country, just the things that he can do at each level on the court and play solidly on the defensive end as well. Arizona, with the size that they had on the interior, they were just going inside against him on basically every possession. They were like, okay, you can score 30 against us on the offensive end, but we're going to make you also then come down and play defense. And Duke's inability to protect the rim and have anybody else besides Filipowski being kind of a core defender on the inside, you can't expect your best scorer to also be your best defender and your best rim protector and your best rebounder. That's my concern for Duke. And now, to your point, they've got a lot of young players. It's going to take a little bit of time for this roster to gel. And in the context of the game tonight against Michigan State, let's just take a look here at what the numbers are saying. This is an early look at the Vincerix matchup page where we're pulling in just the best odds and in real time on the teams. And soon we'll be adding in additional kind of analytics and intelligence on the teams here. But when we just go and look here at this Duke Michigan State number, we've got Duke at -3.5 on Bet Rivers. You can get a +4 there on Michigan State. Over under falling in the 140 to 142 range. I know you said you already kind of had a lean towards Michigan State. I would assume seeing that +4 line has you feeling pretty good about the potential of that play amongst these options here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the senior guards. I'm looking at a team that I just think Michigan State needs to come out and get this win and right the ship. And I trust their older players. I trust Izzo to do it. If this game was played in March and Duke had all the experience under their belt, I might more lean towards Duke once I see how all the pieces fit together. There's a lot of questions that Duke's still trying to answer, and you hit it right on the head. Arizona making Duke's best offensive player defend was an issue. Duke lacks a little bit of athleticism in the paint. Ryan Young, the backup center, he's not the most athletic guy. And then Michigan State tonight has Matty Sissoko, a real big man in the post. I think he can give them issues. I think the size could give Duke issues tonight.
Yeah, and another player that in that first game of the year, obviously against James Madison, so tough to entirely judge, but Michigan State freshman Cohen Carr, he's only 6'5", 220, but the guy jumps out of the gym and has great athleticism and plays above the rim, and I thought he was one of the more impressive players on Michigan State. And one thing Izzo has kind of talked about after these kind of struggles early in the season for Michigan State is relying more on these freshman players. They also have Jeremy Fears and other freshmen. They've got good young players, but they also, to your point, have those experienced senior guards and things like that. So I think he maybe has tried to balance out those two things early in the season, but he's said going forward, he's seen enough. He's going to play the players who thinks gives him the best chance to win. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how those minutes get split tonight in this game.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was just going to hit on that. I think it'll be interesting to see how the freshmen get in and how they mix in with the upperclassmen for Michigan State, because Izzo's saying that he's not afraid to turn to them if need be. At the same time, you have to imagine that he's going to give his senior guards all the chances to right the ship before turning to the freshmen.
Yeah, and I think for me, ultimately in this game, kind of feels like one of those stay away games for me. I think the line kind of falls in the area that I probably would have made it. I think I like what Michigan State has on the inside. I don't think it's anywhere near the quality of what Arizona has on the inside. So I don't know about their ability maybe to capitalize on that quite as much as Arizona did. I think Duke probably a deserving favorite, but this, if I had to give a lean, I'd probably stick with you on the Michigan State side of things, just because I don't think there is a ton that separates these teams at this time of the year, especially if Michigan State makes any shots. If they're going to continue to shoot 6% from 3-point range, well, then obviously they're not going to win a lot of games or be competitive. I have a hard time believing that continues. They get a chance tonight, a big matchup, just maybe elevates a little bit too, just in their minds. You play James Madison, you play another weak opponent. You're a team that is thinking Final Four ambitions. Might have been a little bit tough to get up for those games, whether that's right or wrong. They get that chance to get up tonight, and one of the more interesting games, just purely because whoever loses this game will be off to a much rougher start than any one of their fan bases would have expected with 2 losses out of the first 3.
Yeah, definitely not a must-win game by any stretch of the imagination, but would be a huge win to plant their flag early and establish themselves as one of the best teams in the country.
Absolutely. And moving on from that to the second game there of the day, they're playing in Chicago. This series tends to rotate between Chicago and New York. So I was there last year. It's always a fun set of games, and these fan bases travel. No matter where the games are going to be played, there's going to be a packed house with a good chunk of fans from each side. But what Ken Palm's considering the number 1 game of the day, and I'd probably have to agree just because of the kind of unknowns of these two teams in the sense that they really haven't played anyone at all to start the year, Kansas and Kentucky. Kansas opens with a couple of teams outside the top 300 in Ken Palm. Comfortable wins over North Carolina Central and Manhattan. Kentucky also playing less than stellar opponents with pretty straightforward wins against New Mexico State and Texas A&M Commerce. We look to the line here, Kansas and Kentucky, 6.5 for Kansas, the favorite here. You can get a 7 on Kentucky, over under falling in the kind of 147, 148 range. Initial thoughts on what should be one of the more interesting games of the day, a young Kentucky team versus the experience in the preseason number 1 in Kansas.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. It's just the experience that Kansas has, bringing back McCullers, bringing back DeJuan Harris. Of course, you get Hunter Dickinson out of the portal. Kansas is one of the most experienced teams in the country. Kansas is the most talented team in the country. They deserve that number 1 ranking. Looking at Kentucky, a ton of talent coming in. I think it was 3 of the top 6 recruits in the country. They've got guys that are going to be playing in the NBA. This is a great chance for them to come out and showcase what they can do. That said, I would probably be leaning Kansas minus 6.5 here, solely because the experience, solely because I trust them over 40 minutes to take control of the game, play their style of basketball. I could see the young Kentucky guards getting sped up a little bit, making some wrong decisions. I'd be on Kansas in this spot.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Obviously, a little bit of a difficult line. You'd love, if this was a -4, -5, or something like that. Seems like it'd be a hammer spot for Kansas. I don't think you're getting the best number on them here, but I would lean that way as well. When you look at Kentucky through the first 3 games of the season, just the usage rates going through those freshmen, 30% of the possessions, Dillingham being involved, 24% of the possessions, Wagner being involved, and roughly 22% of the possessions, Justin Edwards being involved for Kentucky. So they're relying on these freshman players, but this is a big spot against the Kansas team that has loads of experience across pretty much every position on the roster. One of those games where maybe Kentucky gets off to a fast start. It's competitive out of the gates, but you just expect Kansas to wear them down over the course of 40 minutes. So I think I agree with you. I think this is one of those games where there isn't a whole bunch to even say about it, just because we know what Kansas is. We know that why they're number 1 in the country. We know what Kentucky kind of the storyline is for them this year, going back to Calipari's bringing in young players and kind of leaning on them. They have both played nobody. They've both looked fine out of the gates. They've done what you'd expect them to do against the level of competition that they played. But really, this is the first litmus test. And barring Kentucky getting blown out or Kansas losing, I don't really see where too many, huge takeaways will come from this game, assuming it goes according to plan.
Yeah, I will say this game is a huge opportunity for the young Wildcats, though, to get it on a neutral floor. If they can come out and show the country what they're capable of, it's just a huge opportunity for them. I think for Kansas, more so a take care of business game, prove why you're the number 1 team in the country, get in, win, get out. But yeah, huge spot for Kentucky tonight to put the country on notice with the W.
Yeah, and I think looking back historically, let's see the last time that they faced off in the champions, or last time Kentucky and Kansas played. This was back in the COVID season. They have not faced since 2021. So exciting to see these premier titans of the college basketball landscape getting going this early in the season. A great chance to assess both of these teams. I tend to think that it's going to go relatively according to script. Kansas wins this game by roughly 10 points, would be my take. Now, with that said, I would love to see a highly competitive game. I would love to see the young Wildcats giving us something to get excited about for the rest of the season. But Bill Self, Hunter Dickinson, just the depth of experience on Kansas, I'm not going to doubt them until I have a reason to so far out of the gates of the season. So totally think we're on the same page there. And
Yeah.
one that's, again, exciting to watch, but maybe not just from a competitive or what standpoint. Some of these Big East, Big Ten games, I think, are a little bit more interesting, in my opinion, despite the fact that it's Kentucky versus Kansas.
Yeah, definitely Kansas, Kentucky going to be a better game to review than preview just because we need to see what the teams can do. But we should learn a lot about both teams tonight.
Absolutely. And we move on to a game being played also in Illinois. This a home game for the Illini. It is number 11 in Ken Palm Marquette traveling to Illinois. And when I pull up these odds, Hunter, I think I have a feeling that I know what you are going to say, because this was surprising to me. Illinois by 1.5. This feels like a game where they want you to be betting that plus 2.5 on Marquette, because simply just looking at the numbers, Marquette predicted to be a better team here, predicted to be one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the Big East. They are road underdogs at Illinois. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. It's a Illinois line the whole way. I think the books are looking for you to take Marquette, one of the top 5 teams in the country, with the points, but I'd be on Illinois in this spot tonight.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those where, sure, there's plenty of times, nobody truly knows what's going to happen. Obviously, that's just the reality of of sports betting. With that being said, we listed off 3 or 4 games on the opening slate on Friday where the lines just didn't align with how you would just naturally think about the game, and I think every single one of those went in the opposite direction. So totally agree with you, just purely looking at it from an odds perspective. But as we look at these two teams, specifically, we look at an Illinois team, did not face much competition against Eastern Illinois and Oakland, took care of business there. Marquette, kind of same deal. So I think we're in the similar boat here in the Kansas Kentucky landscape, where, yeah, I think the odds are an interesting thing to analyze here, probably more than there's really anything you could say from these two teams specifically. A game where, again, the review is probably more interesting than the preview, and the odds probably tell us more story than anything statistically we could find out about these teams so far.
Yeah, and these games, the Big Ten, Big East, it's going to go a long way. It's a measuring stick for both the teams involved, but also for the conferences. A really big opportunity for the Big Ten tonight to go out and get some statement wins.
Yeah, and with this being a home game for Illinois, obviously not a long trip from Marquette. They're up in Wisconsin over to Illinois, so not the most difficult road trip for Marquette to be making this early in the season. These teams, I thought they played last year. They did not play last year. That was a different game. But Shaka, as we talked about kind of in the preview show, he's had a lot of success in the regular season with Marquette. They're going to be a team that we're going to want to judge come March. So again, another game where an exciting one to watch early in the season. I was actually talking to one of our colleagues, Steve. He went to Illinois, and we kind of agreed that it's another one of those games where it's kind of a no-lose situation here for either team, assuming that they're competitive and don't just get blown out or look terrible. So if you're competitive in this game, Illinois versus Marquette, a couple mid-level or upper mid-level teams in the nation. Let's just see a competitive game out there, and we'll have more to assess of these teams kind of down the road.
Yeah, these games are just so important for building confidence, building trust, learning how to win close games. You just look at these games that are in November, and they really have implications come conference, getting your team ready to play.
So that is I guess, the marquee tonight matchup in the combination of the Big Ten versus Big East in the Gavitt tip-off games. We did have one other one last night that we did not mention, which was Xavier and Purdue. That was a game where we didn't talk about it, but the Purdue line was like minus 18,
Yeah.
which, yeah, Purdue is a good team, but Sean Miller's a great coach, and Xavier is always, it's my belief, and they were last year, that Xavier under Sean Miller is going to be competitive pretty much every season. I can't think of many years at Arizona where they weren't competitive or bring one of the best teams in the Pac-12. Now, obviously, it's a different story in the Big East. Purdue wins that game comfortably. I don't think it was ever close, but Xavier also covers that easily. Did you have any thoughts about that Purdue Xavier game at all?
I think Purdue looked the part of a top team in the country. Zach Edey's coming back to defend his National Player of the Year award. I'll just say though, I don't think there's a team or a court that Sean Miller Xavier could be playing in the country where I'm not going to take him plus 18.5. Sean Miller knows how to coach. He knows how to get the most out of his guys. Like you said, they cover easily. It's 83-71, lose by 12. I think Xavier's going to be tough in the Big East this year. I think this is more about Purdue. You know, Mackey Arena is turning in one of the best environments in all the country. I think it's right up there competing with Cameron Indoor at this point. So really tough road test. They compete, they lose by 12, they cover, they move on. Hopefully it's a great learning experience for the team.
Yeah, and another one of those games, and I think it's obviously this one was already played, but I think we would have said the same thing ahead of time. It's like if Xavier covers this spread, they play competitively, Purdue wins easily. That's kind of the outcome you would expect there. And one where, again, not a lot to read into either team. They kind of did what you expected. And that's what'll be tonight. I think that's the kind of the thing for all of these games. Like, as long as it kind of goes along the script, we probably won't have a lot of hot takes about these teams going forward. It's if these a game or two just goes completely off script where we start to wonder. And I think maybe the St. John's Michigan game was an example of that, where St. John's just didn't look the part of maybe what we expected of them ahead of time. So that's really what I'll be watching for tonight. And the next one in this is 6 o'clock tip up in Providence, a new look Providence team, Wisconsin heading up there after a loss to Tennessee at home last Friday. That was another one of the marquee games on Friday. Tennessee looked really good up there in Madison. Wisconsin kind of played what we would expect them to play. I don't think they're going to be great this season, but this is an interesting one. Wisconsin again at Providence. Let's take a look at what the numbers are looking like in this one. Wisconsin actually favored on the road here against Providence. The over-under about 141. We were wrong in the fact the Wisconsin-Tennessee game went over, which was a surprise and what we thought would be a little bit of a rock fight. Providence, a 2-0 start to the season. Wisconsin with that loss to Tennessee. Hunter, any initial thoughts on this one?
I am having a really hard time understanding how Wisconsin's a 1-point favorite in this game, which makes me think that you need to be on Wisconsin in this game. They're coming off the home loss to Tennessee. Now they're going on the road and they're a 1-point favorite against a Big East team in Providence with a new coach, Kim English. I got to be on Wisconsin here. I don't know what's up with that, but what does Vegas know? That's just a Wisconsin line all the way.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, just looking at KenPom here, KenPom has Wisconsin at number 25, even after that result against Tennessee. Providence at 57. So I think it's possible this Providence team, they've played Columbia in Milwaukee. They did win both of those games, but those definitely aren't the strongest of opponents. They've looked good on the defensive side of the floor, ranking top 25 in a variety of defensive metrics. You look at the Wisconsin team coming off of that loss, but shooting the ball nicely, playing well on the offensive side of the ball. Kind of that balanced attack that you'd expect from Greg Gard, solid offensively, solid defensively out of the gates here to start the season. But yeah, it's an interesting line. I saw it earlier, and it actually was Wisconsin at a pick'em number. So money actually coming in on Wisconsin, moving that number to -1. And again, a number where at this point of the season, we don't have enough information really about these teams to know a lot about them. Just following the odds and following the numbers as interesting or not predictive, because who knows what'll happen. But from an analytical standpoint, one of the really only things you could look at this early in the season, and I agree with you, Wisconsin, Providence, you just think of that game, you think Providence probably the more likely winner there. Numbers say the opposite, so I think I'd join you on the Wisconsin side of things.
Yeah, and I think this line also speaks to the Tennessee hype. You know, Tennessee plus 300 favorite odds on to win the SEC. Maybe Tennessee's just really good, and maybe losing to them by 10 isn't a horrible outcome. I mean, obviously you'd never want to drop a game at home, but if Tennessee's as good as everyone's saying they are, then it kind of could make sense why Wisconsin's still a good team, still better than Providence. Just couldn't match up with, the top of the top.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting on Tennessee because actually I watched, a good chunk of that Tennessee-Wisconsin game. And Tennessee is a team that last year, and we talked about this in the season preview, for a good part of the season, Tennessee was the best, if not one of the best teams in the country. They lose Vescovi late in the year, struggle. They end up losing that game to Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16. But they came back, brought back a lot of good players. They add a transfer in Dalton Connect. Is that how you say it?
I'm not sure, but he went off.
Yeah, he comes in from Northern Colorado and drops 24 points on 7 of 11 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3 after scoring 17 in the opener. So Tennessee has all the looks to me if I was just simply ranking the teams right now as a top 5 team in the country. So I agree with you that we're probably, if you just again think about the game, Wisconsin loses at home, easy to think, oh, that's a tough result for Wisconsin. If you said Wisconsin lost a somewhat competitive game against one of the very best teams in the country at home, then it doesn't sound so bad.
Yep.
So I am with you on that one. The next one up is a 10 o'clock start. And the nice things about some of these games is we get a nice kind of split of when the games are going. These first 5 games all falling, or these first, 5 games all at different times. So we're getting a kind of chance to, I love to watch the second half of a game, for example. We just watch the second half of all of these games, see what is happening. It is Iowa at Creighton. I have a feeling we are going to see a big number on the over-under here when we take a look at this one, Hunter. Let's see. Yeah. We've got Creighton here at home as an 11.5 point favorite. You can get a 12.5 on Iowa at the moment on Caesars. The over-under falling between 162.5 and 164. And when you look at these teams, we just take a look at how many points they've scored out of the gates here. This will make sense. Iowa putting up 110 in the opener against North Dakota and 98 against Alabama State. Obviously not the strongest of opponents, but then we look at Creighton, who scored 105 against Florida A&M and 89 against North Dakota State, shooting the lights out from 3-point range. Seems like a game that's going to be high scoring. What are your thoughts about 2 potent offenses getting it going there in Omaha tonight?
Yeah, if you like offense, this is a game to turn into. Man, Creighton, if they're going to be as good as people say they are this year, this is a game where they're going to go out and they're going to take care of business and they're going to cover the spread. There's a lot of hype on the Creighton train. As far as Iowa, we've come to understand their style of ball. They're going to get up and down. They're going to take a lot of threes. So definitely, I'd look at the over tonight. It's about 82, 83 points a piece. Factor in the spread, you're looking at like a 90 to 80 ball game. I think that feels right. I think both these teams are going to be getting up and down, and they're going to be playing off each other's speed and shot making.
Yeah, and I think I'd just take Creighton here. Honestly, like I've seen, this is somewhat. I don't even know if this is a hot take. I don't think Fran McCaffrey is that good of a basketball coach when things start going bad for Iowa. I've seen him coach a couple times actually in person, and some of just the weirder coaching efforts, like when the game starts turning against Iowa, he doesn't do a lot to change the tides of the game that I see. I think he's like a front running coach, and it matches Iowa's style of play. When they get out and they're running and gunning and everybody's making 3-pointers and everything's awesome, then things go well for Iowa. I think that Greg McDermott is one of the top coaches in the country. It's a home game for Creighton. They've come out and Baylor Shireman, 6 of 13 from 3 to start this season. Trey Alexander, one of their best players. He's only 2 of 6 from 3, but he's playing great. They bring in Stephen Ashworth from Utah State. He hits 6 out of 10 from 3. Kalkenbrenner's hitting 3s to start the year. They've got a freshman, Isaac Trout. I don't even know how you say his last name. No, sorry there. Isaac. He comes out. He's 5 of 11 from 3. This Creighton team is legit. They're at home. The crowd's going to be crazy there in Omaha. Yeah, 11.5 is a pretty big number, but they in such a high-scoring game, too, where they're drilling 3s, I could see them winning this game by 20 points. I'm excited about what Creighton's done to start the season just from a shooting standpoint, so give me the Jays tonight.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a game where Fran McCaffrey picks up a technical foul. Probably set the over-under at 1.5 on if he even finishes the game. It's going to be a rough environment, and he's a guy that he's not a guy that's known to get into it with the refs a little bit.
I just saw a couple weeks, I think it was last week, there's the video of him when he's just staring at the ref.
Yes.
The ref's like standing there. He just takes one step closer and is just staring at him the whole time. So, yeah, if you like Creighton, hopefully they get off to a good start, turn the tides against Fran and company, and then they don't bring much to the table to fight back. That's my game plan for riding with the Jays tonight in that one. I'm not going to say it might be my favorite bet of the night. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't like Fran McCaffrey. I like Craig McDermott. So maybe my play of the night there for the Jays. We'll see what happens. Let's see any other interesting games here tonight. Yeah, one other game that's I guess it's not that interesting. Texas A&M goes to SMU. Just a note, Texas A&M we spoke highly of going up to Ohio State. They took care of business there. They go place SMU in Dallas. A little Texas on Texas action there. A game you'd expect Texas A&M to win. Let's just quickly touch on this one. The spread there. Texas A&M by just 5.5 actually going down to SMU. SMU 3-0 to start the year. That's maybe a surprising line, just again because I think we're pretty high on Texas A&M this year, and maybe SMU is supposed to be maybe a little bit better than you'd project.
Yeah. On Texas A&M, real quick, how about the football program presenting the $160 million check on the field that goes towards buying out Jimbo Fisher after the 51-10 win? $76 million to go do whatever you want. That's we talked about it on last episode. Texas A&M NIL coffers are like none other. So yeah, definitely got to hit on that. Looking at the game tonight, I'd be on Texas A&M -5.5. Texas A&M picked second in the SEC preseason poll. We look at what Tennessee did to Wisconsin. I think Texas A&M can go take care of business in Dallas tonight.
Yeah, and I think where I'd go actually too, and it didn't mention this, just the over-under. You can get an under 143 right now on Pinnacle. Again, one of those games where we kind of talked about this on Friday. If you like Texas A&M, you probably like the under too, just in the sense that SMU has been playing a pretty fast brand of basketball, especially offensively. I just trust Buzz Williams. I trust Texas A&M. They've been 345th in the country in tempo to start the year. Their style of play is going to be lock you down defensively, run the offense, get easy baskets late in the shot clock. So I think that's probably where I'd go, but I agree. I'd be very surprised if Texas A&M loses this game, but the spread a little bit tighter, kind of like that Penn Villanova game last night, like everybody acting like this is the biggest upset of, the day, which it was, but that game, if you just looked at the spread going into it, was supposed to be closer than I think you would have just thought, Villanova versus Penn. I think that's kind of what we're seeing here in the Texas A&M SMU number as well.
Yep.
So just looking ahead, next couple of days, we'll be back on Friday to preview the Friday action as well as begin to preview what is going to be some exciting preseason tournaments. We're really looking forward to that. We'll be talking futures. There's a variety of those tournaments you can actually bet futures on. And as a golf bettor, there's nothing that I like more than a futures bet that gives you a couple days worth of action to follow and track. So we'll definitely be talking about that come this weekend. Seeing if there's any other games that come up this week. On Thursday, a tournament kicks off in South Carolina. We're going to get Utah, Wake Forest, Dayton, LSU. So some interesting games there. Any other games on the slate that caught the eye, or I think those probably touched on a majority of what people will be watching tonight?
Yeah, those are the ones that I'll be tuned in tonight.
Awesome. Well, look forward to keeping tabs on these games tonight. Follow Vincerix_hoops on Twitter. We'll obviously be keeping track of all the action and watching stuff there. And also be on the lookout tomorrow. We are going to be releasing the matchup page to the public here so that you can go in there, see what the best odds are, find the best lines for these games. There's 50, 100 games sometimes on a college basketball slate. Very difficult to find the best numbers. And we're trying to make that as easy as possible. So excited to get that out there tomorrow. But mainly excited right now for tonight and seeing these games. Hunter, look forward to seeing what goes on. And you'll again have boots on the ground tonight. Is that right down there at McNeese?
Yep, that's right. I'll be courtside again at McNeese. Will Wade, American Gangster. Come on.
All right, good stuff. We will talk to you all later.
All right. Thank you, Adam.